Julian Hartwell stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Manhattan penthouse, watching the city pulse with life 40 stories below. At 38 years old, he had everything the world promised success could buy. His tech empire, Hartwell Digital Solutions, had revolutionized cloud computing and made him one of the youngest billionaires in America. The penthouse stretched across 5,000 square feet of polished marble, custom furniture, and art pieces worth more than most people earned in a lifetime. Yet standing there in his perfectly tailored suit, Julian felt nothing but emptiness. The apartment was silent except for the soft hum of central air conditioning. Everything was temperature-controlled, light-controlled, noise-controlled. His entire existence had become an exercise in control, removing any variable that might introduce chaos or emotion into his carefully constructed world. He loosened his tie and checked his watch. It was past 11 at night, but his mind still raced with quarterly projections and merger negotiations. Sleep rarely came easily anymore. He walked through the vast living space where shadows played across white walls. The penthouse had been designed by an award-winning architect who specialized in minimalist luxury. No clutter, no warmth, just clean lines and expensive emptiness. Julian poured himself a glass of water from the kitchen, his footsteps echoing against the stone floors. He noticed the hallway light was still on near the staff quarters, a section of the apartment he rarely acknowledged. The staff was meant to be invisible, efficient, and silent. The girl who lived in shadows, Leia Carter, had arrived in New York 6 months ago with a single suitcase and a heart full of hope. At 24, she had left behind the rolling hills of rural Georgia, her aging grandmother, and the small nursing program she could no longer afford. Her grandmother's medical bills had piled up faster than Leia could count, and working double shifts at the local diner had barely kept them afloat. When the opportunity came through a domestic placement agency to work as a live-in housekeeper for a wealthy Manhattan resident, Leia had prayed it was the answer she needed. The agency coordinator had assured her that Julian Hartwell was a professional, rarely home, and preferred minimal interaction with staff. The pay was more than generous enough to send money home every month and maybe, just maybe, save a little toward finishing her nursing degree someday. Leia had accepted without hesitation, telling herself this was temporary, a stepping stone towards something better. Living in the penthouse felt surreal. She had her own small room tucked away behind the kitchen, simple but comfortable. Every morning she woke before dawn to ensure everything was perfect before Julian stirred. She cleaned rooms he never entered, arranged flowers he never noticed, and prepared meals he often forgot to eat. She moved through the apartment like a ghost, careful not to disturb the perfect order of his world. In 6 months, they'd exchanged perhaps 20 words. Mostly his brief instructions delivered without making eye contact. Leia did not mind the silence. It was safer than conversation. She had learned long ago that girls like her, girls without money or connections, survived by being invisible. She kept her head down, did her work well, counted the days until she could return home with enough savings to make a real difference. At night, she would sit by the small window in her room, writing letters to her grandmother about the city lights and the strange beauty of living among clouds. The night, everything changed. That particular evening, Leia had worked later than usual. Julian had hosted a small dinner party for business associates, and the cleanup had taken hours. By the time she finished, exhaustion weighed heavy on her shoulders. She retreated to her room, grateful for the solitude. The door did not have a lock, something she had noticed but never mentioned. Who would enter the staff quarters anyway? She peeled off her uniform, the simple black dress and white apron that marked her place in this world. The fabric had grown damp with perspiration from hours of work. She stood in her cotton slip, reaching for a clean night shirt from the narrow closet when she heard the door handle turn. Her heart stopped. Time seemed to fracture into slow motion as the door swung open and Julian Hartwell stood in the doorway, its expression frozen in shock. Their eyes met. Leia's hands flew to cover herself, clutching the night shirt against her chest. Her face burned with humiliation, so intense it felt like physical pain. She could not breathe, could not move, could not understand why this was happening. Julian stood motionless, his face pale, mouth slightly open as if his mind had short-circuited. "I am sorry," Leia whispered, her voice breaking. "I did not know you were there." "I am so sorry." The apology made no sense. She had done nothing wrong, yet instinct told her to apologize, to somehow make this moment less terrible by taking the blame. Julian seemed to snap back to awareness. His eyes widened with horror, not at her, but at himself. "No, I am sorry," he stammered, backing away. "I did not mean to. The light was on and I thought, I am so sorry." He pulled the door shut quickly, leaving Ela alone in the sudden silence. She sank onto the edge of her bed, trembling. Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. This job was all she had. If he fired her, if he told the agency, if word spread that she had somehow been inappropriate, she would never work in the city again. Her grandmother needed her. She could not lose this. Outside in the hallway, Julian stood frozen, his hand still on the doorknob, his pulse hammered in his ears. The image of Leia's face, terrified and vulnerable, seared itself into his memory. He had seen her fear pure and raw, and realized with sickening clarity that he was the cause of it. Not because he had intended harm, but because in his world intention did not matter. Power did, and he held all of it. The weight of silence. Julian walked back to his bedroom in a daze. He sat on the edge of his bed, head in his hands, trying to process what had just happened. It was an accident, a simple mistake. He had noticed the light on and thought perhaps there was an electrical issue. He had not expected anyone to be there, but explanations felt hollow against the memory of her trembling hands and whispered apology. He had built his empire on logic, calculated risks, and strategic thinking. Emotion had always been his enemy, the weakness that led to failure. After his parents' bitter divorce when he was 12, after watching his mother lose everything to his father's ruthless lawyers, Julian had promised himself he would never be vulnerable. He had studied, worked, and climbed until he stood above everyone else. But tonight, alone in his expensive bedroom, he felt smaller than he had in years. Leia did not sleep. She lay in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, playing the moment over and over in her mind. She thought about her grandmother's voice on the phone last week, telling her how proud she was. She thought about the nursing textbooks she had sold before leaving Georgia. She thought about the dream of wearing scrubs instead of an apron, of helping people instead of cleaning up after them. All of it felt impossibly far away now, when dawn finally broke, painting the city in shades of gold and gray. Both Julian and Leela rose with the weight of the previous night pressing on their shoulders. Neither knew how to move forward. Neither understood that the accidental moment of collision had set something in motion. Something that would crack open the carefully constructed walls they had each built around their hearts. In the cold light of morning, the penthouse felt even more like a prison, trapping to people who had never really seen each other until it was too late to look away. Sunlight filtered through the massive windows of the penthouse, casting long shadows across the polished floors. Julian stood in his bathroom, staring at his reflection in the mirror. Dark circles hung beneath his eyes from a sleepless night. He had always prided himself on discipline, on the ability to compartmentalize and move forward. But this morning, every attempt to focus on the day ahead crumbled against the memory of Leia's frightened face. He dressed slowly, selecting a charcoal suit from his walk-in closet. His hands trembled slightly as he fastened his cufflinks, a detail that irritated him. Julian Hartwell did not tremble. He commanded boardrooms, negotiated billion-dollar deals, and made decisions that affected thousands of employees. Yet, one accidental moment had shaken him more than any business crisis ever had. In her small room, Leia had already been awake for hours. She had scrubbed her face until it hurt, trying to wash away the shame that clung to her skin. Her uniform hung freshly pressed on the back of her door, waiting. She knew she had to face him eventually. The thought made her stomach twist with anxiety. Part of her wanted to pack her single suitcase and disappear, but she could not afford to run. Her grandmother's medication cost more each month, and the small amount Leela had managed to save would barely last 2 weeks. She pulled her dark hair into a neat bun, smoothed down her uniform, and took a deep breath. Whatever happened today, she would endure it. She had survived worse. Growing up poor in rural Georgia had taught her resilience. When her parents died in a car accident when she was 16, leaving her to care for her ailing grandmother, she had learned that survival meant swallowing pride and pushing forward. Julian found Leia in the kitchen, preparing his morning coffee with the same quiet efficiency she always displayed. Her movements were precise, controlled, giving nothing away. He cleared his throat, and she turned slightly, her eyes meeting his for just a fraction of a second before dropping to the floor. "Good morning, Mr. Hartwell," she said softly, her voice steady, despite the tension that filled the room. "Leila," he began, then stopped. What could he possibly say that would make this better? "About last night." Her shoulders stiffened. "It was an accident, sir. Please, we do not need to discuss it." "But I want to," Julian insisted, stepping closer. "I need you to understand that I would never intentionally invade your privacy. The light was on, and I thought there might be an issue with the electrical panel near your room." She nodded, still not looking at him. "I understand, Mr. Hartwell. It will not happen again. I will be more careful about the door." Her words struck him like a physical blow. She was taking responsibility for his mistake, protecting herself by accepting blame she did not deserve. It was a survival instinct he recognized from his own childhood. The art of making yourself smaller to avoid further harm. "Oh," he said firmly, "this was my fault, not yours. You have every right to feel safe in your own space. I should have knocked. I should have called out. I failed to respect your privacy, and I am truly sorry." Leia looked up then, surprise flickering across her delicate features. In 6 months of working for him, she had never heard him apologize for anything. Men like Julian Hartwell did not apologize to people like her. They gave orders. They expected perfection. And they moved through the world as if everyone else existed only to serve their needs. "Thank you," she whispered, unsure what else to say. Julian nodded, then hesitated. "If you want to request a transfer to another household, I will understand. I will make sure the agency gives you an excellent reference. Do you want me to leave?" The question escaped before she could stop it, her voice smaller than she intended. "No," Julian replied immediately. "But I want you to feel comfortable here. That matters more than my convenience." The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. She had expected coldness, dismissal, perhaps even an accusation that she had somehow orchestrated the situation. Instead, he stood before her looking genuinely troubled, as if her feelings actually mattered to him. "I would like to stay," Leia said quietly. "If that is acceptable to you." "Of course," Julian replied. "And Leila, if you ever need anything or if anything makes you uncomfortable, please tell me. You are not just part of the household staff. You are a person, and you deserve to be treated with dignity." Pieces of the past over the following days. Something shifted in the penthouse. Julian found himself paying attention to details he had previously ignored. He noticed that Leia arrived before dawn each morning and often worked past midnight. He noticed the way she carefully saved the leftover food from his meals, packing it neatly to take back to her room. He noticed the worn edges of her uniform and the way her shoes had been resoled multiple times. One evening, he found her sitting in the kitchen during her break, writing in a small notebook. She quickly closed it when she heard his footsteps, but not before he glimpsed her neat handwriting covering the pages. "What are you writing?" he asked gently, leaning against the door frame. Leia hesitated, then answered, "Letters to my grandmother. She raised me after my parents died. She has trouble with her vision now, so my neighbor reads my letters to her." "You must miss her," Julian observed. "Every day," Leia admitted, her eyes soft with affection. "But I am here, so I can help her. She needs expensive medication for her heart condition. The money I send home keeps her comfortable." Julian felt something twist in his chest. While he lived in luxury, he barely noticed. Leia worked herself to exhaustion to afford medicine for someone she loved. The contrast between their worlds had never been more stark. "Hey, what did you do before you came to New York?" he asked, genuinely curious. "I was studying to be a nurse," Leia said, a hint of wistfulness entering her voice. "I completed 2 years at the community college near my hometown. But when my grandmother got sick, I had to stop. The tuition and her medical bills, it was too much. You wanted to be a nurse? Julian asked, surprised by how much this detail affected him. I still do, Leela replied quietly. Someday, when I save enough, I will finish my degree. I want to help people the way the nurses helped my parents before they passed. They made those last days bearable, treated them with such kindness. I want to give that to others. Julian studied her face, seeing determination beneath the exhaustion. Here was someone with real purpose, real dreams that extended beyond accumulating wealth or power. When was the last time he had wanted something that did not involve profit margins or market dominance? That is a beautiful goal, he said sincerely. Leia smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her features. Thank you, Mr. Hartwell. Pieli, he said, call me Julian. At least when we are alone like this. She looked uncertain, but nodded. Julian breaking through the ice. As weeks passed, their conversations grew longer and more frequent. Julian found himself coming home earlier, lingering in the kitchen while Leia prepared dinner. He asked about her day, her grandmother, her memories of Georgia. She answered cautiously at first. Then, with increasing openness, as she realized his interest was genuine, he learned that she loved classical music, but had never attended a concert because tickets were too expensive. He learned that she had never seen the ocean despite living on an island surrounded by water because she never took days off. He learned that she wrote poetry in her notebook, verses about home and hope and the strange beauty of feeling lost in a city of millions. In turn, Julian began sharing pieces of his own carefully guarded past. He told her about his childhood, about watching his parents destroy each other in a bitter divorce that had nothing to do with love and everything to do with pride and possession. He told her about his mother, who had died alone in a modest apartment 5 years after losing everything, and how he had been too consumed with building his empire to visit her in those final months. I thought success would make me happy, Julian admitted one evening, staring into his wine glass. I thought if I became powerful enough, wealthy enough, I would never be vulnerable again. But all I did was build a prison. It is not too late, Leia said gently. You can still change, still choose differently. Can I? Julian looked at her, really looked at her, and saw compassion in her eyes instead of judgment. I have spent 20 years becoming this person. I do not know if I remember how to be anyone else. Start small, Leia suggested. Small choices, small kindnesses. That is how change happens. Her words stayed with him. That night, Julian made his first small choice. He went online and anonymously paid the medical bills for Leia's grandmother through the hospital's charity program. He did not tell Leia. The gesture was not about recognition or gratitude. It was about doing something right simply because it was right. The next morning, Leia received a call from the hospital informing her that a donor had covered her grandmother's expenses for the next year. She cried in her small room, overwhelmed with relief and gratitude. When she emerged, eyes red but smiling, Julian pretended not to notice, but something warm bloomed in his chest, feeling he had not experienced in decades. The walls crumbled, days turned into weeks, and the invisible wall between them continued to dissolve. Julian started leaving books on the kitchen counter, novels and poetry collections he thought Leela might enjoy. She started leaving small touches throughout the apartment. Fresh flowers arranged with care. His favorite tea prepared without him asking. Handwritten notes with quotes she thought he might appreciate. One Saturday morning, Julian made a decision that surprised even himself. He knocked on Leela's door and waited until she answered, carefully respecting the boundary he had violated before. Yes, Mr. Hartwell, she asked, reverting to formality in her confusion. I have tickets to the Philharmonic tonight, he said, holding up 2 envelopes. I thought you might like to attend as my guest, not as staff. Leela's eyes widened. I could not possibly. Why not? I do not have anything appropriate to wear, she admitted, embarrassed. That is easily solved, Julian said. Please, Leia. Let me do this. You deserve to experience the music you love. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. Okay, thank you. That afternoon, Julian arranged for a personal shopper to bring a selection of dresses to the penthouse. He stayed out of sight while Leela tried them on, respecting her privacy. When she emerged that evening in a simple but elegant navy dress, her hair falling in soft waves around her shoulders, Julian felt his breath catch. She was beautiful, not in the polished way of the women he usually encountered at social events, but in a natural, unguarded way that made something in his chest ache at the concert hall. Julian watched Leia more than he watched the performance. Her face glowed with pure joy as the orchestra played. She closed her eyes during the most moving passages, swaying slightly to the music. When the final notes faded, and she turned to him with tears in her eyes, saying, "Thank you. That was the most beautiful thing I have ever experienced." Julian realized something that both terrified and exhilarated him. He was falling in love with her. Not the shallow infatuation he had experienced before, but something deeper and more profound. She had cracked open his carefully constructed armor, not with intention, but simply by being herself, by showing him that kindness and strength could coexist. That vulnerability was not weakness, but courage. As they rode home in the car, their hands accidentally brushed on the seat between them, neither pulled away. In that small contact, a new understanding passed between them. The walls had not just crumbled. They had fallen completely, and neither of them knew what would come next. Only that they could not go back to the way things were before, the risk of truth. The morning after the concert, Julian woke with clarity he had not felt in years. Sunlight streamed through his bedroom windows, and for the first time in as long as he could remember, the emptiness of his penthouse did not suffocate him. Something had shifted fundamentally within him. A transformation he could no longer deny or rationalize away. He found Leia in the kitchen as usual, but everything felt different now. She moved through her morning routine with the same efficiency, but there was a softness to her expression, a subtle awareness that hummed in the air between them. When their eyes met, she smiled, a genuine expression that made his heart stumble. "Good morning," Julian said, his voice warmer than his usual professional tone. "Good morning," Leia replied, pouring his coffee. "I wanted to thank you again for last night. The music, the experience, it meant more to me than I can express." "You do not need to thank me," Julian said, stepping closer. "Leela, I need to talk to you about something." Her hand trembled slightly as she set down the coffee pot. "Is something wrong?" "No," he assured her quickly. "At least I hope not. But I need to be honest with you about something I have been feeling." Leia's expression grew cautious, protective. Julian recognized that look now, the instinct to shield herself from potential hurt. It pained him to know she had learned that defense, so young. "Over the past few weeks, you have changed something in me," Julian continued, choosing his words carefully. "You have shown me what I have been missing, what I sacrificed in my pursuit of success. Your kindness, your strength, your ability to find beauty in small moments. These things have reminded me how to be human again." "Mr. Hartwell," Leia began, but he gently interrupted. "Julian, please. And let me finish." He took a breath, knowing he was about to cross a line that could never be uncrossed. "I have developed feelings for you, Leia. Real feelings that go beyond gratitude or friendship. I know this is complicated. I know the power dynamic between us makes this inappropriate. But I cannot keep pretending I do not feel this way." Leia stood frozen, her eyes wide with a mixture of emotions Julian could not fully read. Fear, hope, confusion, longing, they all flickered across her face in rapid succession. "You cannot mean that," she whispered finally. "We are from completely different worlds. I am your housekeeper. People like you do not fall for people like me, people like us." Julian repeated, frustrated by the invisible barriers society had constructed. "Leia, those labels mean nothing to me anymore. You are not just my housekeeper. You are a woman of remarkable character, intelligence, and compassion. You are someone who sacrifices her own dreams to care for someone she loves. You are someone who finds joy in music and writes poetry and treats everyone with dignity. Those qualities matter infinitely more than wealth or social status." Tears gathered in Hila's eyes. "You do not understand what you are saying. If people find out, they will assume the worst about me. They will say I manipulated you, that I used my position to seduce a wealthy man. My reputation, my ability to work, everything will be destroyed. Then we will protect your reputation, Julian said firmly. But Leia, I need to know if you feel anything for me too. Because if this is only on my side, I will never mention it again. I will maintain complete professionalism, and we can pretend this conversation never happened. Leia closed her eyes, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. That is the problem, she said, her voice breaking. I do feel something. I have tried so hard not to try to remind myself of all the reasons it is impossible. But when you started really seeing me, talking to me like I mattered, I could not help it. Julian reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. Then we will figure this out together. No more hiding. No more pretending. We will do this right. The transformation begins. The following morning, Julian made the first of many changes. He called the domestic agency and formally terminated Leila's employment contract, paying out 6 months of severance despite their protests. Then he called Leila into his office where she stood nervously clutching her hands together. You fired me, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I ended your employment as my housekeeper, Julian clarified, because I cannot date someone who works for me. The power imbalance is not fair to you. But I need that job, Leia protested, panic rising in her voice. My grandmother, the medical bills. Please sit down, Julian said gently, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. When she complied, he continued. I have a proposal for you. I need you to consider it carefully, without feeling pressured. I want to hire you as a consultant for my company. Leia looked confused. A consultant? I do not have any business experience. You have something more valuable, Julian explained. You have perspective that people in my world desperately need. My company has lost touch with what matters to real people. We design technology without considering how it affects communities, workers, families. I want you to help me change that. I do not understand, Leia said, shaking her head. Let me show you. Julian opened his laptop and pulled up financial reports. My company made $8 billion in profit last year. We gave less than 1% to charity. We pay our lowest-level workers barely above minimum wage while executives make millions. We have the resources to make real change, but we have not because we stopped seeing people as people and started seeing them as resources to maximize. He turned the screen toward her. I want to create a new initiative focused on corporate responsibility and community impact. I want you to lead it. Your salary will be $200,000 per year. Leila gasped. That is absurd. I am not qualified for that kind of position or salary. You are more qualified than anyone else I know. Julian insisted. You understand struggle, sacrifice, and what real people need that matters more than a business degree. And the salary is not charity. It is what the position is worth. What you are worth. People will talk. Leia warned. They will say I am your mistress, that this is just a way to pay me for other services. Let them talk, Julian said firmly. We know the truth, and over time your work will speak for itself. But Leia, I need you to understand something important. This offer stands regardless of what happens between us personally. If you decide you do not want to pursue a relationship with me, this job is still yours. I am not trying to buy your affection. I am trying to correct a power imbalance so that whatever we choose to do, we do it as equals. Leia stared at him for a long moment, searching his face for deception or hidden motives. But she found only sincerity, the same genuine care he had shown her over the past weeks. I need time to think about this, she said finally. Take all the time you need, Julian replied. In the meantime, you will stay in the penthouse as my guest, not my employee. And I have taken care of your grandmother's medical expenses for the next 5 years through the hospital's foundation. That is not conditional on anything. It is simply the right thing to do. Fresh tears filled Leia's eyes. Why are you doing all this? Because you showed me what I had become, Julian said softly. And you gave me a chance to be better. That gift is beyond price. Building something real. 3 days later, Leia accepted the position. She started slowly sitting in on meetings and listening to how decisions were made. Julian watched her carefully observe the dismissive way executives talked about workers, the casual disregard for human impact in pursuit of profit. She took notes in her small notebook, the same one where she wrote letters to her grandmother. After 2 weeks, she presented her first proposal to Julian in private. Her hands shook as she laid out her handwritten plans, but her voice was steady. "I want to start with the lowest paid workers in the company," she said. "I researched what it costs to live in the cities where we have offices. Most of our entry-level employees cannot afford rent, food, and basic necessities on what we pay them. One proposed raising the minimum wage for all company employees $225 per hour and offering comprehensive health insurance. That will cost millions," Julian observed, not disagreeing, but testing her reasoning. "It will cost approximately $30 million annually," Leia confirmed. "But you made $8 billion in profit last year. You can afford it. More importantly, these people work hard for your company. They deserve to live with dignity." Julian smiled, pride swelling in his chest. Approved. What else? Over the following months, Leia transformed from a nervous newcomer into a passionate advocate. She proposed scholarship programs for children of company employees, else mental health services for workers, and community investment initiatives in every city where Hartwell Digital Solutions operated. Julian approved every proposal, watching his company's culture slowly shift from pure profit focus to balanced human consideration. That changes did not go unnoticed. Business publications ran articles questioning Julian's sudden turn toward corporate responsibility. Some investors grumbled about reduced profit margins, but employee satisfaction soared, productivity increased, public perception of the company improved dramatically through it all. Julian and Leila's personal relationship deepened carefully and genuinely. They took things slowly, building friendship into romance with patience and mutual respect. Julian courted her properly, taking her to museums, concerts, and quiet restaurants where they could talk for hours. He introduced her to his world gradually, never rushing, always ensuring she felt comfortable. Leila, in turn, helped Julian reconnect with parts of himself he had buried. She encouraged him to reach out to old friends he had abandoned in his climb to success. She suggested he'd volunteer at a community center, where he discovered he enjoyed mentoring young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. Slowly, the cold, calculating businessman transformed into someone capable of warmth and genuine connection. The ultimate gesture. A cool autumn evening exactly 1 year after the accidental intrusion that had changed both their lives. Julian took Leia to the rooftop garden of the penthouse. He had transformed the previously empty space into a lush sanctuary filled with her favorite flowers, soft lighting, and comfortable seating. Music played softly in the background, the same classical pieces they had heard at their first concert together. "This is beautiful," Leia breathed, taking in the transformation. "I wanted to create something meaningful," Julian said, taking her hands in his. "Leia, this past year has been the happiest of my life. You did not just change my heart. You changed everything about how I see the world and my place in it. You did the same for me," Leia said softly. "You showed me that kindness still exists, that some people truly care about doing what is right." Julian took a deep breath, his heart pounding. "I know we come from different backgrounds. I know our relationship has faced skepticism and judgment from people who cannot see past social barriers, but none of that matters to me. What matters is how I feel when I am with you. How you make me want to be a better man. How your presence fills all the empty spaces I thought would never be whole again." He lowered himself to one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Leia gasped, tears already forming in her eyes. "Leia Carter, will you marry me? Not because of what I can give you, but because of who we are together. Because you are my equal in every way that matters. Because I love you more than I thought possible to love another person." As Leia whispered, then louder, "Yes. Absolutely yes." Julian slipped the ring onto her finger, a simple but beautiful design she had once admired in a jewelry store window months ago, not knowing he had paid attention. He stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with all the love and tenderness that had grown between them. "I have one more thing to show you," Julian said after they finally pulled apart. He led her to a table where documents were carefully arranged. I have established the Carter Foundation in your name, funded with $1 billion. It will focus on healthcare access, education, and supporting families facing medical hardship. You will direct it however you see fit. Julie and Leia protested, overwhelmed. That is too much. It is exactly right, he corrected gently. You taught me that wealth means nothing unless it is used to help others. This is not my gift to you. This is our gift to people like your grandmother, like your younger self, like everyone struggling to survive while the wealthy hoard resources. We are going to change that together. Leia threw her arms around him, crying and laughing simultaneously. I love you so much. I love you too, Julian replied, holding her close. Thank you for walking into my life. Thank you for showing me what really matters. Thank you for giving me a second chance to get it right. As they stood together on the rooftop, the city stretching endlessly below them, both understood that their story was just beginning. They had crossed boundaries that society said should not be crossed, had built love where logic said it could not exist. But in doing so, they had discovered something profound. That hearts recognize truth regardless of circumstance. That real connection transcends wealth and status. And that sometimes the most powerful transformations begin with a single moment of vulnerability. Accidental intrusion that had started with shame and fear had become the foundation for something beautiful and lasting. Julian had entered Leia's room by mistake and seen her defenselessness. But in the end, that moment of vulnerability had saved them both, cracking open the walls around their hearts and allowing love to finally find its way inside. They married 6 months later in a small ceremony attended by Leila's grandmother, who cried tears of joy throughout the entire event. Julian's company continued its transformation, becoming known not just for innovation, but for genuine care about human welfare. And every year on the anniversary of that fateful night, Julian and Leia returned to the rooftop garden to remember how far they had come, how much they had grown, and how grateful they were that sometimes the best things in life begin with a mistake that turns out to be destiny.